So I'm Desmond. I'm the Schrier and Cecily Chair in Development Economics. The chair is really focused on trying to think about key issues in South Africa's development and broader development. The way in which I've conceptualized the chair is to try and ask the question, what difference does it make to look at people more holistically? We often look at people piece by piece, and in doing so miss key interactions that occur across different outcomes or across life stages. So for example, when we're thinking about adolescence, we might think about an intervention to respond to HIV, and another intervention to respond to school dropout, and another intervention to respond to violence. And if we deal with each of those individually, we come up with very specialist interventions, very narrow interventions that deal with that particular outcome, when they all might come from common causes. So if we address, say, the family circumstances, improving income within the household or family supports, we might see an improvement across the board, but we miss those when we look at outcome by outcome. And that occurs across life stages too. So we focus on early child development, which is critical and has huge potential returns. But if we don't focus on what happens next to children, we also miss the potential to maximize those returns. You can have a great early childhood and then go to a terrible school or have difficult time during adolescence, and we miss out on those possibilities. And that carries through into adulthood as well. We often focus on girls and say we need to address gender inequality and talk about efforts to improve access to education. But girls are more likely to be in school in South Africa than boys, and are more likely to finish school than boys. Gender inequality occurs in the labour market primarily due to lower levels of participation in the labour market and lower wages in the labour market. So we keep essentially asking girls to be better by getting more education rather than asking the world to be fairer and address the concerns that arise later in life, because in some ways it's easier. It's easier to focus on girls' schooling, it's easier to focus on early childhood if it's only one thing, it's easier to focus on HIV if it's only one thing. It helps us limit our responsibility to a particular thing and advocate for that particular thing, and fails to deal with the larger socio-economic context and the broader issues that really face us and challenge us and that are limiting our potential for human development. And now is a particularly key time, in my view, to address these issues, because we're facing a period in the world that's going to be increasingly characterized by crisis. We saw what COVID did. We're going to see increasing nationalism as we have in many Western countries. We're likely to see more pandemics. We're likely to see increased impacts of climate change. And how are we going to deal with those? Do we have all the answers? We don't have those answers, and the only way we're going to get them is if we have the people to innovate and the people to answer. And we have this conceptualization as if those who have are going to be enough, that they will be able to find the answers. Whereas, who knows, the next Einstein who could be coming up with an answer to a key question could currently be getting malnourished in their first 2 years of life and their cognitive development hindered for the rest of their life. And we're going to miss out, not just for them, but for everyone else as well, by not making those investments to ensure that we have our full human development potential realized in South Africa, so that we can deal with the challenges that are going to come up. We're not going to have that arrogance that we think that the few who have access to those resources are going to answer all the questions. And so really it's a key moment in South Africa and more broadly to think about human development in this much broader way. So we have a number of different projects linked to the chair. We have a cohort study, for example, where we've been tracking children and their families since they were 5 years old. The children are now 18 years of age. And that helps us really understand what are some of the determinants that shape outcomes. So many outcomes in adolescence may be influenced by what happened early in life. They may be influenced by the family environment, they may be influenced by experiences the children have. And for us to begin to unpick that, we really have to collect quite a considerable amount of data over a long period of time. So it allows us to unpack that. Then other projects we have are trying to use data like that more in the policy domain. So we have a project which we've worked on over the last 5 years called the Accelerate Hub, which was an international project looking at interventions which improve multiple outcomes for adolescents. So as I was mentioning earlier, not trying to compartmentalize young people into different pieces, but to say, what are the interventions which improve things across the board? And key among those come out to be family-based interventions, that really investing in the family leads to these improvements that we see across multiple domains. And we've been pushing that at a policy level, both within country, but also with many UN agencies and internationally, to try and change the way in which we think about the problem and what types of interventions that we come up with as a result. So it's early days in the chairs. We are building up a set of students. We have a number of people now linked to the chair. We try as far as possible to link people into projects. So we have a number of people doing PhDs linked to the cohort study. And so they're able to embed their questions so they can utilize the data we've collected over the last 15 years, but also add in new questions to see what their particular interest is addressed. We have other students who are trying to ask these bigger policy questions. So for example, we have a lot of work done globally now on what's called investment cases, saying, well, what is the highest return you get for investments? And many of these are sponsored by UN agencies like UNICEF. And so we're examining to the extent that those investment cases actually reflect the values of the institutions that commission them. So UNICEF, for example, is a rights-based institution. It says you should address children's issues because they have a right for those issues to be addressed. But then they're asking, what are the returns? What are the economic returns on those investments? Which is actually contrary to what they state is their aim. And we are trying to ask questions there, and he's trying to ask questions there about what do you do when those things come into conflict. So let's say you see higher returns for investment in boys because they have better labor market outcomes, so you're going to prioritize boys. And when you have very low returns in, say, children with severe disabilities, are we going to exclude them from our investments? And of course, UNICEF would jump around immediately and say, no, no, no. And of course they wouldn't want to do that, but yet they're doing a type of investment or type of analysis which promotes that kind of thinking in the belief that that's what ministries of finance and treasuries across the continent want to see. And we're not sure that that's what they want to see, so we're also trying to unpack what it is that is really guiding government decision making in order to tailor the analysis to fit both what government is indeed focused on, but also to reflect the values of the institutions which are commissioning them.